Today, we are continuing our efforts to kind of just review some of the strategies, some of the skills, some of the requirements that are going to be necessary for you to be successful in the AP test. AP test for this class is next Monday. Starts at 8 o'clock, but you need to be here by 7:15 in the a.m. Yesterday, we briefly discussed multiple choice strategies. That is about 40% of your exam score. But you've also got an awful lot of writing. We've got our SAQ, I think that's 20% of the exam score. You've got the DBQ, that's 25% of the exam score. And then you've got the LEQ, that's your final 15%. Today, we're just going to kind of briefly review some of the requirements that you're going to need to fulfill to be successful on the SAQ and the LEQ. We will go over some samples of each. I'll show you the 2019 kind of overall writing section so you can kind of see what it looks like. Go over some strategies of especially on the LEQ and the SAQ, choosing the appropriate ones to write because you do get a little bit of choice. And then we'll look at some samples of each. Again, just pay attention. If you're not taking the AP exam for this first half of class or so, do what you need to do. Work on something that's going to help you in my class or some other class if you're missing stuff. Obviously, that's the priority. But if you are taking the AP exam, I mean, this is coming up. So pay attention, take it seriously, ask questions if you got them. Again, some of the samples I'm going to show you, I think will give you a good idea of how your writing theoretically should look. So just kind of keep that in mind. I did include a couple videos on here. I don't know if we've watched the LEQ one. I think once upon a time we did watch. The SAQ, I don't think that we did. Heimlich history, great for review. He explains things a little bit. In fact, his form for the SAQ, it's got an entirely different acronym. I think his is T. It's more or less the same as the ACE format, but it's just a little bit different. Again, if you wanted to go that route on your SAQs, more power to you. His approach is a little bit different than mine. Doesn't really matter which one you use. You got to find a way that works best for you that still gets you to where you're getting all the points that you need. I mean, as long as you are catering to the rubric. SAQ doesn't exactly have a rubric, but LEQ certainly does. There's a variety of approaches you can use. So these videos are not mandatory, but again, if after today you're still like, man, I don't understand this, these are a couple things you could watch that maybe will refresh your memory, maybe get you a little bit more prepared for what's to come. The second half class, when we're talking about LEQ specifically, even if you're not taking the AP test, you probably need to listen up. Tomorrow, you're going to have an assignment, kind of practicing writing about some LEQ prompts. You'll need to provide some context, which we'll get into here in a second. You're also going to have to come up with some thesis statements. It's open note, open book, do what you got to do. But really try to cater to what would ultimately get you points if you were going to write one of these on the AP exam. Because the good thing is, as far as introductions go, your context, your thesis, you got to have that on the LEQ. You also have to have it on the DBQ, which we're going to discuss later in the week. So if you can master that skill, I mean, that translates over into both of your main types of essays. Plus, it's the first thing that the readers read. That's what sets the tone for your essay. That's what kind of plants in the reader's mind, hey, this kid knows what they're talking about. Man, this is going to be a good essay. Or, oh my God, this essay is already off to a bad start. So having a good introduction, having a good driving thesis statement, to kind of frame your argument. And also building some context. That way you truly introduce the topic and the time period to who's reading it. I think it's a very important skill that you will get to practice tomorrow on our assignment. That's going to be for a daily grade. But as long as you attempt it and turn it in on time, that's really what I'm looking for. It's not exactly a participation grade, but if I see some good effort, you're going to do just fine. The big thing is turning it on time. No reason you cannot turn it in before the end of the period tomorrow. I myself am going to be downstairs giving AP tests all day tomorrow, so I'm not going to be here. But the assignment itself is pretty self-explanatory. It is going to be due before midnight tomorrow, but get it done before you leave class. So that's kind of what's going on as far as today, a little bit of what's going on tomorrow. As far as grades, like I've said, most of your grades for the 6 weeks are in. Kind of looking ahead, We've got 2 or 3 more daily grades. We've got 2 more extra credit opportunities. That's pretty much it. That's all there is. Have you guys went over the semester exam exemption policy yet in any of your classes? All right, I'll pull it up. Remind me probably on Thursday. I'll pull it up. But essentially, if memory serves correct, if you've got an 80 average for your final grade, you are exempt from the second semester exam. If you are taking the AP test and you sit for it, it only has to be a 75 average for you to be exempt. Unlike the past, there is no attendance requirement. So usually it was like, you miss 4 days, boom, you're taking it. They have waived the attendance requirements. So it is arguably easier than ever to be exempt from semester exams than it has ever been. Again, remind me, I'll probably actually put the exemption policy under today's date a little bit later when I update Canvas with the video and stuff. So you can look it up. But yeah, it's if you've got an 80 or above for your final grade, you're exempt. Or if you take the AP exam, 75 and above, you're exempt. So hopefully most of you guys will be exempt and not have to worry about it. But if you're not exempt, obviously that's going to be one last thing that could have a pretty sizable impact on your grade. Point is, we're getting towards the end. All right, take advantage of the few opportunities we have left. If you're missing stuff, get it in. Everything is still open for now. It's not going to be open forever. We still got some extra credit opportunities. I mean, there's still some opportunities to do some stuff, but they're dwindling day by day. So keep track of your grade, and obviously if you have any questions, let me know. Every once in a while I make a mistake. Every once in a while I'll forget to, especially if you turn something in late, I'll forget to update it in the gradebook. I'm a human. It happens, okay? It's kind of on you to monitor that stuff. And if something is weird, let me know. Also, if you're not where you want to be, come and talk to me. Let's see what we can do. I'll try to help you out if I can, but you also have to help yourself out. Again, I'm giving you lots of opportunities to hopefully get where you want to be, but you've got to want it for yourself. You can't, I can't do it for you. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and get started. If you will, let's go ahead and before we do anything, let's look at this real fast, the ACE format. This is the last time I'm really ever going to talk about it because, man, I've went over it so many times. You can review this handout for yourself. Now, let me explain. This is not mandatory. The College Board didn't come up with this and said, hey, this is what it has to look like. But based on my experience, I've graded SAQs for about 3 or 4 years for the College Board. If you can follow this format, more or less, you're probably going to be successful if you know what you're talking about. The biggest issue I've seen this year with SAQs is people not giving me enough. This isn't an essay, all right? It's not that. In fact, you're only going to have about a page. You'll see the pages here in a second with the samples, but you're only going to have about a page to answer each set of SAQ questions. So by design, they cannot be very long, okay? 3-4 sentences max. That being said, they usually should be about 3 or 4 sentences, okay? Every once in a while, you'll be able to get away with 2, but that should be the standard. And this is a good kind of formula to make sure that you're getting everything, because you need to have some academic vocabulary in there. You need to explain that you understand what that vocabulary means. Again, a lack of specific information, people just throwing out like one sentence that's really vague that could apply to almost everything. Those are the biggest things I'm saying. Utilize your knowledge, okay? The facts that you have learned, the vocab we have used, all the crazy notes I've made you take, implant that stuff into your writing, not just the SAQ, but everything else we do. That's why we've been doing it. All right, so the ACE format, 3-sentence format, stands for answer the question pretty straight up, introduce what your answer is, clarify for the second sentence, just kind of give a definition and an explanation of some sort, and then if you've got more details, expand. Again, it's not mandatory. You're going to see some of the samples where not everybody exactly does it exactly like this, but they have more or less the same elements, and that's how they get their points. So with that being said, let's go to our next little document. This is the one you're probably going to have open most of class, the FRQ World History PDF from 2019. So last year was a freak show, with COVID and everything. We did not give a traditional AP exam. It was kind of Depending on your circumstance, it was either the easiest one we've ever given or the hardest, because for world history, at least, all it was one DBQ, one essay. Here you go, write it. Based on that, you get college credit or not. Okay, if you were very adept at writing DBQs, you probably got the college credit. If it was something you had no idea what to do, you were done. Okay, the good thing about going back to the traditional method is you don't have to be perfect at every single thing. Maybe the SAQs aren't your thing, but you're okay at DBQs. Maybe the multiple choice confuses the heck out of you just because it is confusing, but the writing you're pretty solid on. Again, it's not about being perfect. It's about trying to accumulate as many points as you can in each section. Try not to walk away, especially in the writing, with no points at all. Even if you don't really know what you're talking about, write something. Okay, especially in the SAQs, you could get lucky because on some of them it's pretty easy to get the points. Others, it's more difficult. But this is what you're going to see. You know, when you take the AP test, if you're taking it on Monday, you'll start off with the multiple choice. They will call the time. You can't go back and look at it. Your next thing is moving on to the FARQs. Okay, so your next section is going to be the short answer questions, and this is more or less what it's going to look like. This is from 2019. Curriculum was a little bit different back then, so some of the years that they ask about, you're not going to be asked about. Like, we used to go back to like the Neolithic Revolution, like 10,000 years ago. For this AP test, it's really only 1,200 on. So if you see some stuff, you're like, I have no idea what that is. It's by design. We didn't teach that information. You won't be held accountable for it now, but it's still in the same format, so it's worth checking out. So your first part of the of the FRQs, I should say, is your SAQ. They're going to give you 4 sets of questions. Okay, like when we do SAQs, that's one set of questions. They're going to give you 4. They're going to give you 40 minutes to get it done. But here's the deal. Questions 3 and 4, you choose one or the other. So you're only really writing 3 sets, but the last 2 sets, you'll have a choice of one or the other. They will give you a brief kind of overview, but again, just make sure you're thorough, make sure you're specific. So what you're going to want to do on the SAQs first is you're going to want to scan through your sets. Okay, between 3 and 4, you got to figure out which one you're going to do, which one you're not going to worry about. From there, you need to prioritize. 40 minutes is not a very long time. So the first couple minutes, you just need to scan. The first set of SAQs is usually going to be a primary source document of some sort. Could be a picture, could be, you know, a quote. A lot of times it's quotes. And you'll have, you know, your standard question over. Your second mandatory SAQ is going to be probably a secondary source. So maybe a chart, maybe a historian, you know, and some questions that go with it. And then your third and fourth sets, the ones that you get to choose, they're the standalone ones. We've probably done more standalones than anything else. So step 1, you scan through all of these. Okay, probably go with 3 and 4 first and figure out which one you're not doing. That way you can just move that from your mind. You can mark through it, okay? Then with what's left, look them all over. Spend a minute or so reading each of the questions, looking at the sources if you have them. Figure out which one you feel the best about and always start with that one. Okay, it's the same strategy we've been talking about. You may run out of time. You may not get through all of them. You may not get points for all of them. But you want to make sure that you're walking out of the SAQ with at least some points. So do the ones you feel the best about first. Now we're going to take a look at this particular SAQ, okay, because this is one that does apply to things that we've learned. As I'm reading through this, just think to yourself, you don't have to write anything. We're just reviewing. I'm not going to make you do a whole lot of hard work, but I want you to think about this. As you listen to me read the document, as you listen to me read these questions, think about things that you might use for answers, how you would formulate your answer, what sort of ideas would be going in your head. I mean, me, if I was doing this and reading it for real, as I read them, I'd be jotting down just some words. You can write on your test. Just jot down some words, you know. Like here, Mongols might be something to write about. But again, you know, it's just something I want you thinking about, because after this, we're going to look at some samples of some people that actually did it well. So me on these, it depends, all right? Some people like to read the questions first. That way they kind of know what to think about as they're reading the source. Some people like to read the source first. Again, it's entirely up to you. Either way, you need to read through everything pretty thoroughly. So what we have here, this is a secondary source. Thomas Allen, historian, he's talking about culture and conquest. It comes from 2001. Secondary sources, the dates usually don't help you as much. Primary sources, they usually do. And here we go. Inner and Central Asia have long been seen as a zone of contact and transmission, a lengthy conveyor belt on which commercial and cultural wares traveled between the major civilizations of Eurasia. The nomads had an essential but largely unacknowledged role in this cultural traffic. While nomadic empires had as their primary objective the control and exploitation of sedentary subjects, sedentary just means settled, their secondary effect was the creation of numerous opportunities for cross-cultural contact, comparison, and exchange. Indeed, although nomads are normally included in the analysis of the political context of Trans-Eurasian exchange, they are typically left out of the cultural equation. Here, the great sedentary civilizations are placed at center stage, particularly when scientific and cultural transfers are under consideration. But as we have seen, pastoral nomads were the chief initiators, promoters, and agents of exchange between East and West in the 13th and 14th century. Now, a little tip, I always get confused on this, so I have to slow down. I like to, when I see like 13th, 14th century, I like to write down the dates. Like 13th century is the 1200s. 14th century is the 1300s. It's weird, and it confuses me, so I put down the dates just to bring a little clarity, but that is something just to kind of think about if it confuses you. Because in these particular examples, if you're wrong on the dates, you're looking at different groups of people, you're looking at different examples. So essentially what this historian's saying is, you know what? Nomads, you know, these people that move around from place to place, especially in Central Asia, man, they're some of the chief dispersers of everything. Okay, they're moving around all the time. Yeah, maybe they're not coming up with a lot of new technology and ideas on their own, but they're the chief ones that are transferring those ideas from east to west, back and forth. Okay, that's kind of his point. Whether that's true or not is kind of up to you to decide. So based on what you've read and based on what you know, here's the questions that you're expected to answer over this particular one. Identify one specific historical example of a cultural exchange between nomads and non-nomads that occurred before the period of 1450. There's a lot of ways you could go here, okay? Before 1450 is key, though. Okay, the Mongols would be around before 1450, so use your imagination. Here's a key, though. A lot of times on mine, because I like you to do a little extra in preparation for the AP exam, almost all mine are identify and explain. Now you gotta go into some depth there. That's where the ACE format gets into it. But if you just see identify, it doesn't have to be a whole lot. Identify is giving an example. Explain is going into further depth. So anytime you see explain or identify and explain, you're going to need to do more. If it just says identify, you might get away with a sentence or two. Now, I would still provide more details if you have them. But what I'm saying is if you don't know a lot, but you think you might have an example, man, identify it. You know, hey, one good example of cultural exchange between nomads and non-nomads were the building of the Mongol Empire in the 1200s. Borderline. I mean, I don't really like that. I'd want more, maybe get into gunpowder, get into, unfortunately, disease. You could get into, you know, all sorts of stuff. But if it just says identify, man, you might get away with something. So never skip those identify questions, because if you have something specific you can mention, even if you don't know that much about it, that might be enough to get you the point. The identify is pretty easy. Do more if you can, though. Okay, so that one's pretty straightforward. B, a little bit more difficult. For the period 1450 to 1750, identify one development that changed the role that Central Asian nomads played in cross-regional exchanges as described in the passage. Now, we're going to look at some samples here in a second. And, you know, when people hear nomads, the Mongols, I mean, that's who we talk about the most. So that's what they mentioned. Problem is, 1450 to 1750, they're not really a big deal anymore. So again, you got to know your time periods. All right. And here it's just talking about a change, you know, something that changed, you know, in the context of nomads being these big players in regional exchange. Then C, explain. So this one you got to go into a little bit more detail. Cross-cultural exchange that would challenge the assertion in the last sentence of the passage concerning the nomad's role in cross-regional exchanges before 1450. And the last sentence is, but as we have seen, pastoral nomads were the chief initiators, promoters, and agents of this exchange between East and West, between the 13th and 14th centuries. So let's look back at, or actually we haven't gotten to it yet. I'm going to go through this right here. Now, you don't have to open it right now, but I want you to know what all's there. Okay, this is a sample of some kids that wrote about that set of questions. The College Board does this. The College Board releases all their free response questions, okay? They didn't really do it last year because last year was weird. But 2019, 18, 17, you can go back and you can find old questions that they asked. Okay, the rubrics have changed, so I wouldn't go back much further than like 2018, 2017. But you can see the DBQs they asked. You can see the SAQs they asked. You can see the LEQs they asked, and they give you sample essays, graded sample essays that you can use to kind of model your writing on. They tell you what got the point, what didn't get the point, and why. Lots of resources, guys. Most kids never take advantage of them. But if writing is not your strong suit, look this stuff over. Okay, I've got some stuff here you can look over. We're not going to read over all of it, but there's a reason they make this stuff available. The kids that are struggling writing, just kind of seeing examples and comparing it to the rubric, I'm telling you, it will help you tremendously. So if you want, you can open this up. If not, just kind of follow along on the screen. But we're going to look at the samples of just the first SAQ. On the College Board website, you can find all those other SAQs that you just glanced over, but let's look at this one because this one's pretty good. So the first SAQ I think I've got right here. And this is how they're always going to look. For the SAQ, the DBQ, the LEQ, they all pretty much look the same. They will start off with, you know, the SAQ or whatever it is again. They'll kind of go over the scoring criteria. Essentially, you know, for most of these SAQs, there's 3 questions. You can get 3 points, a point for each. Now, if they ask you to identify and explain or identify 2 examples, that's going to be more points because they're asking you to do more than one thing. But typically, yeah, it's 3 points per set. Okay. They then go through the scoring guide. They give you some examples of things that the kids would write about. You can read through that if you want. I think it'd be a good idea. But let's look at some examples. Okay, now at the very end, they're going to tell you how they scored. They'll tell you why they got what they got. And I don't want to go over every single thing because that's going to get boring real quick. But let's look at least this one. Because doggone it, this is good. They did a good job on all this. And here's the thing. It's not the most brilliant writing ever. It's not astounding, but it is solid. It's about as good as it needs to be. Now, I said you got about a page. This is it. That's what it looks like. It's really not even a full page. They're going to give you a box. You have to fit each set. So 3 questions. You got to be able to answer all 3 within that very limited place. You know, you can't write on the outside. You can't go to the next page. You got to condense it. It's got to be in there. That's why something like the ACE format works really well. Now, they don't follow exactly the ACE format, but still very similar in the model. It's 3, maybe 4 sentences. It introduces the answer. It goes into greater detail. It hits on what you need to. And in fact, in some of those identify questions, they actually do a little bit more. But if you can do more, doggone it, do more. Because you never know if that one sentence is going to do it. Usually it won't unless it's just astounding. Again, try to kind of get into the mindset of using that ACE format or something similar. Definitely get in the mindset of being specific. So, question 8. Oh, and one other thing. Label the answers. Some people blend it all together like it's a big essay. It is not. These answers stand alone. And if B is dependent on something that was in A, you may not get the point, okay? You can't also answer the same thing for all 3. Doesn't work like that. They are 3 separate questions. Connected, but separate. So label them as such. Okay, it makes the grader's life a lot easier. And trust me, if they're happy with that, they're probably going to look more fondly on what you wrote rather than, this big jumbled essay and trying to look around. Well, that looks like it's kind of the answer for A, but then it goes down here. And I think this is B. You don't want them asking questions. Okay, you don't. You want it very cut and dry. You want to make it as easy for the grader as possible, because guys, grade 700, 800 of these. By the time I get to 750, I'm looking at it. I'm half insane. If the writing's kind of sloppy and I'm squinting and I'm trying to figure out what's what, 0, moving on. Happens all the time. Write neatly. Okay, don't worry about spelling grammar, but if I can't understand it, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes trying to figure out what that sentence says. I'm going to spend about 20 seconds and I'm going to say, no credit, and I'm going to move along. That's true on all your writing, so keep it in mind. So let's look at A. All right, this one was pretty straightforward. Most people would choose the Mongols. Identify one specific historical example of a cultural exchange between nomads and non-nomads that occurred before 1450. That is important. So let's look at this. The Mongols allowed for the cultural exchange of gunpowder. Okay, technically, that might be enough to get them the point on a question that says identify. But you don't want to bank on might. You're not going to get in trouble for doing a little bit more, so do more. And remember, if you do more and you make some mistakes, it's not a big deal. We look past your mistakes. And they definitely took this and they kind of get into further explanation. Gunpowder was used in the non-nomadic Tang and Song dynasties. However, when the nomadic Mongols arose and began to conquer various expanses of land such as Central Asia and Eastern Europe, the spread of gunpowder to places like the Abbasid Caliphate, which was non-nomadic. Kind of, as far as the language, is a little jumpy, but man, it's all there. They got specific examples. The Tang, the Song, the Abbasid Caliphate. They have a specific item that was part of this cultural exchange, the gunpowder. It was spread by the Mongols. I mean, it's not exactly the ACE format, but it checks all the boxes. That's what you want to be able to do. Okay, if you can sum it up in about 3 or 4 sentences, that's perfect. If you can write kind of small, that sometimes helps if you got lots to say. Again, on the identify questions, you might get away with less than that. But if you know more, if you have the details and you have the time, throw them in there. The next question. For the period 1450 to 1750, so the dates are really important here. Identify one development that changed the role that Central Asian nomads played in cross-regional exchanges as described in the passage. So in the passage, they're talking about, man, Central Asian nomads, they're the diffusers. They're the ones that are moving everything. They had a big part to play. Well, as time progressed, we get to the 1400s all the way to the 1700s. What's something that changes as far as them being in the world, the main people that are really responsible for all this cross-cultural exchange? Well, this individual thought about that time period, 1450 to 1750. What's the biggest thing going on? Probably the age of exploration and discovery of the New World and stuff. That's what they used. The age of exploration changed the role of Central Asian nomads. Sea-based trade, especially the Indian Ocean basin, became more prominent, and Central Asian nomads didn't have access to this network. Because of this, Europeans such as the Dutch and the Portuguese began to dominate trade, and therefore cross-cultural exchanges occurred through Europeans. So yeah, this makes sense. He's arguing during this time period it's actually the Europeans that are more responsible for all this exchange than the traditional Central Asian nomads. Because nomads, by definition, they're roaming around the land. Well, because, of the age of exploration and the expansion of trade using maritime routes, well, they do get supplanted. They give specific examples. They go into detail. Pretty solid answer. Last one. Explain one cross-cultural exchange that would challenge the assertion in the last sentence of the passage concerning the nomad's role in cross-regional exchanges before 1450. So here in the last sentence, he's saying before 1450, nomads are the chief initiators. Well, all you got to do here is talk about a different group that wasn't nomadic that was also responsible for a lot of cross-cultural exchange. Well, that's what they do here. Arab traders also played a large role in cross-regional exchanges before 1450. The Islamic Empire spanned Afro-Eurasia, dominating both Silk Road and Indian Ocean trade. Some of the Silk Road, but definitely Indian Ocean. While they were not nomadic, they contributed to the spread of the decimal system from India, which is why it is now referred to as Arabic numerals. Again, specific groups, specific examples. That's pretty darn solid. There's other examples here. Now, again, this is all over that one set of questions. You can go on the College Board website and see examples of all the sets of questions. For that matter, for the last several years. If you have trouble with this, look it over. Again, there's examples out there. The College Board is not shy of telling you what would work, what wouldn't, what they're looking for. It's up to you, though, to get into that, to look over this information. You are not experiencing a scarcity of resources. There's a lot of things out there for you to review and study to get ready for this test. If you do that, you got a really good shot of being successful. But this is what it takes. You got to be willing to go above and beyond. You got to be able to do things outside of the classroom to prepare for this test. If you do that, like I said, I think you all could pass this. You could all get it through your heart. But if you're not willing to study and put a little extra work in, it's going to be tough. It probably isn't going to happen for you. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, next thing I want to look at, and we'll make this brief. We're going to go back to the FRQ in general. Okay, you get done with your SAQ, you will have a 10-minute break. You're going to come back, and then you will have access to the second section, which is your essays. Okay, they're going to give you the DBQ and the LEQ together. They will give you 1 hour and 40 minutes to complete both. They recommend you spend a solid hour on the DBQ, which we're not going to talk about the DBQ directly today, but that's what we're doing on Thursday. Solid hour on the DBQ because it takes a little while to set up. You got to read the documents. You got to figure out how you're going to use those documents as evidence to kind of build some sort of argument. Again, it's a weird process, but once you get down how to do it, the doing it is not that hard. It's just setting it up. It takes a while. This DBQ, yeah, we didn't write this one, but we did a practice DBQ over it. This is the Portuguese Trading Empire, maritime trade. Let's get past that, though. That one wasn't too bad. And again, if you want to see some sample essays over this particular DBQ, they're on the College Board website. This is the 2019 FRQ section. But then you'll get to the LEQ. Now, you always want to do the LEQ last. All right? LEQ, long essay question, it is only 15% of your grade. All right? We did a couple of them. The thing is, though, a lot of the skills necessary to be good on the LEQ, you also need for the DBQ. So kind of learning how to do this, it helps you with the DBQ later on. So the good thing about the there's too many acronyms. The LEQ, the long essay, yeah, they recommend you only spend 40 minutes on it, and you don't have any documents to go off of, but you get 3 choices. Now, again, this is under the older curriculum, so it's got some years on here that wouldn't apply to us, but essentially the 3 choices, they will be 3 different writing prompts from 3 different time periods. So you could have maybe one from 1200 to 1450, maybe another one from 1450 to 1750, maybe the third one from 1750 to 1900. Again, before you start, look them all over. Maybe jot down some ideas of directions you could go with each. You're going to want to write the one you know the most about. And if you don't know a whole lot about the topic, if you don't fully understand the topic, write the one with the time period you remember enough details about. Because even if you don't fully understand the topic, man, you could introduce the time period. You can maybe get a context point. If you get close on some of the historical examples that you bring up, well, yeah, maybe you don't got a solid thesis, but you at least have some evidence that could account for a point. You know, if you demonstrate historical reasoning, there's a point there. We're going to look at the rubric again just real briefly here in a second. But yeah, you got to strategize. You want to pick the one you feel the best about. We're going to look at an example here in just a second of number 4, because it's really the only one that is just over years that we've studied. So how they do it on the LEQ, they'll give you like a little introduction sentence to get you thinking, and then the prompt's always the second sentence. So in the period after 1900, the role of the state in the economy varied, with many states adopting policies to control or manage their economies. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which one or more states controlled their economies in this time period. So communism is probably the big thing that jumps to mind, but there's other directions you could go. You could write about one historical example, like the Soviet Union. You could write about multiple historical examples of countries that control their economies in different ways. It's kind of up to you, right? We're going to look at some samples of this, but real quick, let's just review the rubric. What are you trying to do? And the cool thing is, guys, you don't ever have to memorize the rubric. Where was I? They will have more or less a breakdown of what you need to try to do before your DBQ, before your LEQs. Now, it's not phrased the exact same way, so I'd still be familiar with the rubrics, but don't feel like you got to memorize it. The AP History rubrics, it's on today's date as well. But let's just real briefly look at the LEQ portion. Things that you're going to do. There are 6 points. First paragraph or so, you want to knock out your thesis and your contextualization. Your context, I like to start off with this first because it does need to be towards the front of the essay. Otherwise, it kind of bleeds into the body and becomes evidence and not context. But all this is background information. Talk about the time period. Talk about some of the events that led up to whatever this topic was. Again, be specific. Mention some people. Mention some places. Mention some historical developments. Try to integrate some academic vocabulary. If you do it really well, you might be able to do this in 1 or 2 sentences. I would say as a general rule of thumb, about 3, maybe 4 solid sentences, depending on how much you know about the time period, how much you know about the topic. Again, this is your introduction. This is transporting the reader to this time period. That way they kind of know what's going on before the essay starts. Then you got your thesis. Now you can lead with your thesis. You could close out your introduction with your thesis. You could have your thesis at the very end. It could be 1 sentence. It could be a couple sentences that go together. But this is the point you're trying to prove. This is your argument. Okay, this is the preview of what the rest of your essay you're trying to argue for. You're trying to prove is correct. Again, these essays, you are forming an argument. You're proving an argument. You're saying, well, hey, here's states, control their economies to a great extent, such as the Soviet Union under communism, splitting up the land and taking over private industries and, dispersing food and jobs to the people. Boom, that's the thesis statement. Okay, then you would spend the rest of your essay trying to prove that. So these, right there at the beginning, introduction, be great. Evidence, that's just the specific examples. That's the people. That's the policies. That's the Great Leap Forward. That's talking about Mao Zedong. That's talking about the 5-year plans and Joseph Stalin and, mentioning these things and writing about them in a way that shows you do understand them. Okay, you can't just throw names. Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, they led countries. Okay, that's great. But you haven't really proven you knew who they were, why they were impactful. Not saying you got to write, a 5-page dissertation on the life of Joseph Stalin, but if you mention someone, at least give an indication that you do understand why they were significant. As far as the number of examples, throw in as much as you can, but really, they don't have a set number. They say provide specific examples. So to get this first point, 2 would probably do it. Now, if you want to go for that depth and complexity point later, you're going to need more than that. You're going to have to go above and beyond. But you might be able to get away with 2. The only difference between the 1 point and the 2 point here, the 1 point, as long as it's relevant, as long as it fits with the topic, if you put it in there and you explain it, you get it. But to get the 2 points, it really does need to be supportive of your argument. It needs to be more purposeful as to why you put it in there. It really needs to act as proof that your thesis was accurate. Finally, at the end, you got your analysis and reasoning. Do you have a line of reasoning? Is there some structure to your argument? If it's a halfway decent essay, you should get this. If you're comparing, going over causes, going over changes, is it pretty obvious that you're demonstrating those skills? And then you got the unicorn point, the complex understanding. And they give you this just ridiculous summary of what could get it. Honestly, you need to show you know your stuff. You need to give more than enough information to show that you have a thorough understanding of this topic. And if you do that, you got a shot, although it is very rarely given. So let's look at this essay real quick. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I do want to go over the introduction, the context, and the thesis, because, guys, that's what you're going to be doing tomorrow on your little introductory LEQ assignment. You're going to be given some prompts similar to these, and you're going to give me some context, a few sentences, establishing the time period, the topic, all that, and you're going to give me a thesis statement. If you had to write this essay, what would your argument be? Okay, you need to be relatively specific. And I'm going to show you some examples. So let's go, not to the short answer one, but let's go to the LEQ one. Okay, same sort of deal. For each essay, they've got samples, they've got things that could work, okay? Starts off with, some notes. And this is what they would give the graders. That way we kind of know what to look for. So for this essay, develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which one or more states controlled their economies in this time period. Here's some good examples of thesis statements, okay? This first one's really good. The 20th century included several examples of states controlling their economies, the most famous being that of the Soviet Union, which used Marxist ideology to justify its nationalization of industry and the introduction of centralized economic planning. That is perfect. Okay, here you're really only choosing to write about one state, but that's perfectly fine. Okay, so you've identified the Soviet Union, you've told a little bit about how they controlled their economy. The rest of the essay, you'd get into more detail. Here's another one. This one's not as good. This is kind of the minimal level, but this could be enough. In recent years, many countries rejected the idea of trying to control their economies and embraced free market capitalism. They don't give a specific country. You don't absolutely have to, but they at least are telling you this is their argument. Hey, capitalism has spread. So, there's really not as much control of the economy in a lot of places. This gives your essay a sense of direction. And that's all your thesis really is. Context. Now, I don't like this example because this is minimal. But, you could maybe get away with this. Do more if you can, please. I personally think this person got lucky. But this is what they did in their introduction. World War I upset the global political and economic order and led to the establishment of new totalitarian states. For me, I would like to follow that up. Give me some of these totalitarian states like Nazi Germany or Soviet, Union under Joseph Stalin. I think that would really seal the deal. But again, you're just kind of showing a little bit about what the world was like. This is just a sentence. I would shoot for 2, maybe 3, maybe even 4. Because again, the more you put in there, the more likely you're going to be to get the point, because even if you screw up, we look past your mistakes. Okay, I'll kind of let you go through the rest, but here's a good example of evidence. Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward is one of the best examples of communist state controlling their economy. Again, specific person, specific initiative, it fits. Again, you want these specific things in there. As many as you can, at least 2, but as many as you can that they kind of help to build your argument and support your thesis. Again, there's a lot of stuff here. Look it over when you get a chance, but let's look at one essay. That the introduction was pretty solid. They had some good context. They had a good thesis. This is what you're going to need to do tomorrow. So tomorrow, and I haven't decided on exactly what all is going to be in it, but I'm going to give you a few different essay prompts to choose from. I would say for 2, maybe 3 of them max, I'm going to ask you to pretend like you were going to write this essay. Write me out some context. 2, maybe 3 sentences. Give me a thesis. If you had to write this essay, what would it be like? What sort of argument would you form? Be specific. Okay, I think that will really help. But this is an excellent introduction. The first majority of it, the first several sentences are all context, and then they close out with a pretty good thesis. Let me zoom in a little bit. Maybe not that much, but yeah, no, it's good. In the United States, the government in the 1930s used the New Deal program to control the economy in order to help the people during the Great Depression. After World War I, the economies of Germany, a leading industrial power, and Western Europe were ravaged by the impact of World War I. As a result, the dependence on trade for the nations was weakened because of the effects that the Great War had on Europe, which affected the global economy. This caused many nations, such as Germany, the United States, and the Russians, to implement state-controlled economies. Okay, that is all context. You're kind of explaining how we get to this point that governments are managing their economies more. Okay, I don't know if I'd say the U.S. was a state-controlled economy, but definitely the U.S. government started taking a larger role in economic affairs. So again, it's fine. I don't have to agree with everything, but there's enough stuff there. Here's your thesis, and this is what they're going to talk about the rest of the essay. With the New Deal in the U.S., the collectivization of farms in Russia, and fascism state, or the fascist state in Germany, which used the total war economy, multiple states controlled their economies in the time period after 1900. Okay, so they say, yeah, a lot of states are doing it. They say specifically how they're doing it. That's a thesis statement. And then for the rest of the essay, they're giving examples that just kind of prove that they were correct. Again, use your resources. If you're fuzzy on any of this stuff, man, just use what's available. I mean, they're not hiding it. There's a lot of stuff out there that could help you out. Tomorrow, your assignment, like I said, is going to be pretty straightforward. You can look up information if you need to. But again, just kind of practice that skill of giving some good introduction, some good context, formulating a pretty good thesis. If you need help with that, I've got some videos posted. I'm going to have a whole kind of process you're going to go through tomorrow. But your activity tomorrow is for a grade. It's a daily grade. But it's something that I really think could help you not only on the LEQ portion of the AP exam, but the DBQ as well. Plus, like I said, it's for a grade. It can help your grade in this class. It's a daily grade, but still, that's something. Other than that, we got a few minutes left. Again, I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to be here, but I'm going to be giving the AP test. But your assignment will be pretty straightforward. There will be some videos that I would encourage you to watch if you got your headphones. But they're short. They're just Heimler's history videos on context, on thesis statements. And then, yeah, just knock out this assignment. It's not going to be a super long one. Get in before you leave. Again, it's not due until midnight, but get in before you leave. There's no reason that you can't.